my privilege to welcome you to what promises to be a thought-provoking and enlightening discussion. Today, we will delve into the heart of a crucial matter, which is making climate education accessible and engaging for all children, especially those from diverse backgrounds with disabilities. So, our distinguished panelists are Tapua Chimbazwa, Benjamin, here only to address the challenges, but also to explore comprehensive strategies and practical solutions that can create an inclusive and effective learning environment. So our focus today is on breaking down barriers, embracing diversity, and building a collaborative approach for climate education. So today we will do that within our discussion. And thank you once again for joining us. So this very morning, we have with us our first panelist, Tapua Chimbazwa, and he is a visionary leader and social entrepreneur. He is the founding chief of the Innovation Village for Young African Minds, a dynamic youth-led organization dedicated to inspiring and mobilizing young individuals for collective action. With a keen focus on fostering sustainable and environmentally conscious development, the organization under his leadership strives to bridge the gap. He has been actively engaged in various fields such as social justice, policy advocacy, human-wildlife conflict mitigation, climate change resilience building, and community development. His commitment to creating positive change on the African continent is evident in his multifaceted approach to addressing complex challenges. Tapua's global impact extends beyond his role as a founding chief. As a Global Mission Fellow under the United Methodist General Board of Global Ministries, serving as an environmental advocate in Sierra Leone, he channels his passion for environmental sustainability into practical initiatives aimed at building community challenges. Additionally, he actively contributes to women's empowerment, recognizing the pivotal role women play in fostering sustainable development. A true advocate for innovation, Tapua Prosper Chimbazwa is paving the way for a new generation of African leaders who are not only conscious of environmental issues, but also committed to creating lasting, positive change. His dedication to youth empowerment, conflict resolution, climate change mitigation, and conservation has positioned him as a beacon of inspiration for those striving to make a meaningful impact on their communities and the world at large. So let's welcome Tapua Prosper Chimbazwa.
Thank you very much, Patrice, for such a great introduction. I'm overwhelmed just listening to you introduce me in such a way, and it becomes a burden. But anyways, I'll just need to jump into the presentation. Allow me to share my screen. All right. So as you all have been introduced, my name is Tapua Prosper Chimbazwa. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and I'm working in Sierra Leone as an environmental advocate, where I'm working on issues around building community climate change resilience and also making sure that we empower the marginalized communities with particular focus on young women and old women in farming communities. So to begin with my presentation, I'm going to just start with the question, does education really matter? Because I think having this discussion without actually pausing and reflecting on the importance of education, we might, risk hitting the stray bullets of what we really want to achieve and what we really want to talk about. So in my presentation, I just pointed out a few things that I feel like they're very important to note about education, especially around the climate change calamity. And I would say that education empowers people with the knowledge and skills needed to take action on climate change. It also helps to build awareness and understanding of causes and the impacts of climate change, as well as promotes sustainable behavior. And lastly, education is very essential for development of innovative solutions to climate change and building a more resilient future. So education is very imperative and key because you really need to have an understanding of what you're dealing with for you to find working solutions to it. So I'll then move on to the next slide, where I then discuss one of the four of the key strategies that I thought would really work to improve the education situation, especially within the climate change sector. So I'm just going to put down these key strategies. I did this deliberately to put the strategies first and then take you through the barriers and the possible solution to it, because I feel like the key strategies will now speak to the status quo, as you all are aware or might be aware that the climate change education in the global south is still lagging behind in terms of delivering the message to the most vulnerable communities because of different challenges that they are facing. And one of the key strategies that I have acknowledged is that there is need for us to acknowledge culture and context when it comes to climate change. I know climate change is a science that is more or less complex and not many people actually comprehend it. But if you ask the local communities, they have an understanding of climate change that is different from the scientific definitions of climate change. So my first port of call was, how about if we devise and co-create knowledge that is informed by the cultures and the context of the local people that we are going to teach and educate about climate change. That's incorporating culturally relevant content and examples in climate education materials that is closer to home, that people can actually relate to it. And the second is edutainment. I think we're now living in an era where, you know, the social media have taken the toll, and the virtual world have taken the toll, and most people now read less books, but they engage more in entertainment. So how about we create and use interactive and hands-on activities to engage students and communities to learn about the climate change calamity? That way, people can easily grasp, and that can inform behavior change. And the third one is peer-to-peer learning. I've seen that, you know, sometimes people really don't need a lecturer to stand in front of them to actually, you know, deliver the message, but sometimes they just need an environment created for them to cross-pollinate ideas and dissect on a certain issue that will then bring about better solution and better understanding of the subject. So I do believe that peer-to-peer collaboration is very important when it comes to climate change. And the last one that I put was, we really need to have intentional designing and implementation. The reason why I said intentional designing and implementation, you can see that I'll give an example from Zimbabwe. You've seen that so many policies have been created to speak to climate change education. So many programs have been created to speak to climate change education, but there is still a niche or a lacking point when it comes to integrating disability-friendly approaches to climate change education, because you can see that the most affected people are those with visual impairments, are those with hearing impairments. Those people are disproportionately, disenfranchised from this discourse because the content and material that's been created is not friendly to them. I will give a very funny example of this platform where we're talking about these issues. There isn't even, a sign language interpreter to actually communicate the message. So we can see that we are not being intentional when we actually develop these platform, when we develop this kind of interactions when it comes to climate change education. So I really think that we need to pay attention when we co-produce the knowledge, when we also create the materials for climate change education. And then moving forward to the next slide. So I decided, also deliberately did it, that I put the barriers in a small box and the solution in a bigger box. This is me trying to imagine that our solutions are bigger than the problem. And I'm looking at it from an asset-based kind of approach, whereby we don't look much at the problem, but we look much at what we can do and what we have. So most of the problem, especially in the global south, that is faced, or when it comes to climate change education, designing and implementation, is lack of resources, inadequate teacher training, and cultural barriers. We have different belief systems that are always, cut across when it comes to climate change education, because most of the content is designed from Eurocentric or Western ideologies, which really don't actually fit in within the cultural context that the local people are living. For instance, I'll give you an example in Zimbabwe, that people have their own understanding of how the weather patterns are informed and different ways that they are informed. So I really do feel like we really need to structure our climate change education in a way that it responds and it is culturally sensitive. And I'll just give an example. Then in Zimbabwe, climate change education is often not prioritized due to community demands on limited resources, and teachers may lack the training and support needed to effectively teach about climate change. So as you all know, that the global south is directly hit by climate change, and these have transformed lives in different aspects, that social and the economic lives have been greatly impacted, and the resources for these countries to respond to the disasters and also to make sure that the populations are well informed, then they're very little and few. But looking beyond the challenges, I will then move forward to suggested possible solution to this. And one of the major solution is increasing funding and resources for climate education programs. I do feel like COP28 prioritized, yes, they spoke about the declaration for education, and they spoke about the importance of education in climate change education and climate change mitigation and adaptation. But there's still more that needs to be done when it comes to funding, especially to countries in the global south who are finding it very hard to respond to this situation. And I also do feel like countries in the global south need to focus more and bring up the budget when it comes to climate change education within their countries. Also, there is need to provide professional development for teachers to improve their knowledge and skills in teaching about climate change, work with local communities and cultural leaders to promote awareness and understanding of climate change issues. I've seen this working more, especially with the communities that I work with, because cultural leaders are the most respected people. And if they comprehend and understand the message more, it will be very easy to pass the message towards the people around in those communities. Yes, this I've seen it to be a working strategy, and also a strategy that we can use to improve the kind of content that we bring to the table. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that education is necessarily not a luxury, but we cannot afford to leave anyone behind in our efforts to combat climate change. We need every voice and every idea to tackle this global challenge. Let's work together to create a world where knowledge is accessible to all by fostering a culture of inclusion, co-production of knowledge, and collaborative action. We can build a more sustainable future for all. I always want to part ways with people by saying a quote from John Legend's song, which says, "If you hear this message, wherever you stand, I'm calling every woman, I'm calling every man. We are the generation. We can't afford to wait. The future started yesterday and we are already late." So this is a call to action. Let's put our heads together and try to co-produce knowledge and try to work with the communities in a way that will help us achieve the greater picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benjamin is the Human Resources Officer for Eclectic Love. He also champions environmental education here in the Volta region. He is highly motivated. He enjoys overseeing daily administrative functions, planning and coordinating staff, and providing strategic planning to support the executives. With a keen ability to collaborate with teams and address employee questions and concerns, he's committed to fostering a positive work environment. Beyond his professional pursuits, he is a multifaceted individual with a flair for photography as a paparazzi. He likes to snap the pictures and a genuine love for working with children. His admiration for the arts, coupled with his role as a human rights activist, a climate advocate, reflects his commitment to making a positive impact in diverse spheres. He takes immense pride in being an alumni of University of Cape Coast, where he has earned his Bachelor's of Commerce in Human Resource Management. He's currently a proud member of the Eclectic Love team, and here we have Benjamin Valentine Lakai with us. Let's welcome him. Thank you, Benjamin.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I would just like to start my presentation. And thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm blushing. I will start from the broader aspect of education, then channel it to climate change. So first, let's try to understand what inclusive education is. So I was thinking this morning, and I'm like, for you to establish something first, you need to identify a problem. So before inclusive education came, there was something like uninclusive education, where there is discrimination against this particular group of people. They don't have access to education and all those stuffs. So sometimes their actions, you can't blame them for it because they have no idea of what they are doing. So for instance, you go to a farmer is burning bushes, and you be like, with my farm, I can do whatever I want. And he's doing it. But you might stand somewhere and judge him because you think he's an illiterate. But unfortunately, he doesn't have the education we have on climate change or climate action. But if you take the step to go close to the person and tell him, look, if you do this and that, these are the consequences you face, I don't think that farmer would bend their bushes anymore. So back to what I was saying. So inclusive education is more like to solve a problem that was there. So the latter part of my slide says that it goes beyond simply placing students with disability in mainstream classrooms. It aims to create an environment where every learner feels valued and supported. Once you don't make someone feel valued or supported, he won't participate in anything you do. So it's very important and vital that we include everyone in whatever we do. We shouldn't think anyone is an illiterate. You didn't think anyone deserves to know something. And it will really help us towards our agenda on climate action. So Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But one for Goal 4 specifically, Target 4A, we talked about safe and inclusive learning environment. So we build and upgrade education facilities that are child, disability, and gender sensitive and provide safe, non-violent, and inclusive and effective learning environment for all. What we are trying to do is we are trying to make or create a learning environment where everyone is included. We don't take anybody out. Everyone is safe. That way, if you go out there, you've educated a person about climate action, you go and tell the person, look, this is what we are trying to do. If you burn your bushes, this will happen to you. This will happen to the land. The person won't go back to do that. But when you leave some group of people out and you try to educate some of them, what's the possibility that the people that you educated are willing to go out there to share that message with those who are uneducated. So it's very vital that we include everyone in whatever we do. So I'll quickly brush through the gaps in education. We have gender, where most ladies are discriminated against because we feel they need to be in the kitchen to be cooking for us. But then they play a vital role in our societies. We have the socioeconomic gaps where low-income learners do not have opportunity to access education. We have the rural urban, where people in the rural areas don't have access to quality education, cultural gaps, disabilities, quality teachers, and technology. These are all things that are creating gaps in our education system. And because we are leaving majority of the people out, it's really, really disturbing us. It's really disturbing us. So I'll stress on the effects of gaps on sustainable development. So this is where it gets interesting. You realize that education is interlinked with all the sustainable development goals. One way or the other, you watch through the targets of each of the goals, you realize education is in there. It finds itself within the goals. So climate action, that's goal 13. If you look at target 13.1, it talks about improved education, awareness rising, and human institutions. So you realize that within climate action, in as much as we are trying to fight climate action, there is a need for us to educate people about climate actions, the challenges involved in climate actions, and the consequences we might face as individuals if we overlook climate actions. When you come to Ghana, you can go to Keita. There's rising sea levels. People are moving from the seashores to within the town because the sea is now overflowing and taking their lands. Not just Keita. If you go to Maurice there, if you go to Cape Coast, it's happening there. So you realize that each of the goals that we have, one way or the other, education is necessary. Then we come back to economic inequalities. So economic inequality has to do with achieving sustainable goal 1, development goal 1, that's no poverty and decent work. Here's a situation where we are leaving some group of people out. First of all, they are not educated. They can't find a decent work to do. And we are claiming we want to achieve the sustainable development goals by 2030. Yet we are leaving people out. We are not including people in our education system. Do you really think this is realistic and feasible? It's not. But then whenever we bring everyone on board, all hands on deck, and we are doing and we are working towards a goal, you see everything will be perfect. And work together. Gender inequality, when we are leaving our women or our ladies out of the ecosystem, it's like they don't exist. But they are key people to our ecosystem. And this won't allow us to achieve sustainable development goal 5. We also have lack of awareness about environmental issues and sustainable practices. This also comes back to what SDG Goal 13, as I was talking about, climate action. So you see, we can't leave anybody out. We want to solve the issue of climate action. We need to bring everybody on board. So as we are here, what steps have we taken as individuals to try to bring someone, tell someone that, oh, you've seen someone burning a bush and you just start saying all sorts of things to the person. But have you tried going close to the person to ask the person, like, are you aware of what you are doing? Do you know the consequences of the things you are doing? We don't do it. But then we just stand afar, say all we have to say, then just blast the person and we just, oh, okay, fine, it's fine, there we go. But then for us to be able to solve this problem, we need to educate each and every one of these people. We need to find time and educate each and every one of these people. Until 2017, I didn't know people were so much interested in education. Because before 2017, if you want to go to senior high school, you have to pay school fees. It wasn't that much, but you will have to pay. But when the new government implemented a free education policy, you could realize the number of people who really wanted to be educated. It means that there was a huge margin between the people who were in the house because they didn't have the resources to go back to school. So it's something that we should really look at to include everybody. If it needs to be free education for all, the quality should be there. Then we have social unrest, which looks at achieving sustainable development goal system. That's peaceful societies. We claim we want to have peace in our societies, yes, we don't tolerate our neighbors. When someone says something, we just say, hey, you aren't supposed to say this. Then we start arguing, we start doing all sorts of things. We are not helping each other. We need to have a common understanding. And this will happen when we are well educated, when everyone is included in education. Finally, we have unequal resource distribution. That's also achieving sustainable development goals, and that's addressing inequalities, which is also tied to education. So you realize everything we do and all the sustainable development goals are in relation to education. So we keep talking about climate change, but once we are forgetting a particular group of people and we think they don't matter, I don't think we can solve climate change until we go back to our board, get all those people, then we can work together. So some of the strategies include parent and community involvement. We need to go to our parents. Our parents have farms. Sometimes they feel like, oh, the farm is too big, I don't want to weed. So you know what? Just set fire inside and you big farm. There's a whole fire on the farm. There are measures that could be used aside fire. But because they don't know, and that's the traditional way they've been doing things, we can't blame them for it because they are not educated. We need to involve our local communities. We need to go to the rural areas, go and talk to them. Look, when you do this, what happened? When you do that, that's what happened to you. And I think it make an impact. We should adapt to teaching methods to reflect the culture of students. Some of our students to rural areas and they have a notion like there's a particular way we do things. But we involve some of these things we are talking about into our curriculum, it's not going to be possible for us to achieve that goal. Then you have to do continuous assessing of the inclusive practices through M&E. We've implemented policy. What are we doing about it? Are we just sitting back to wait for 10 years time, 15 years ago and say, oh, the thing with it didn't work? Or we are going to put this to check if everything is going well. We need to provide resources. You are telling farmers that, okay, don't bend the bushes. What's the alternative? Are you willing to provide the resources? Because if I'm to just use fire on my farm, it could take me like, let's say, 20 minutes. But then here's the situation, if I burn my farm, it's no good. So I should get maybe 50 people to come and weed for my farm for me. Do I have the money to pay those people? Maybe I need a machine. I need to afford that machine. So some of the things we need to take care of before we can start advocating for the climate change itself. We also need to create a supportive environment and also a peer support program, like my brother said earlier. So I'll move on to my final slide, which talks about real life examples of successful inclusive education policies. So my organization, I belong to Eclectic Lab. We've done so well over the years. Implemented weather. We have the Clean Air Club, brought up the Thrive 360 program. And these programs are really helping, first of all, with inclusive education and also advocating for climate. We have people with disabilities on board, we have females on board, we have males on board. We are trying to everyone to participate. We go to the local communities, we talk to our parents, we try to educate everyone on their actions and how it would have an impact on our society. So we don't say, okay, this particular group of people, let's leave them out. Let's involve everyone. Let's all work together because, like, together we really stand stronger. So my grandma used to say this thing, like, it will tell you, take a piece of a broom, it will ask you to break it. Then it will now tell you, take the full broom. You realize because there's so many broomsticks together, which tells you that when you're together, you are much stronger one when you are an individual. So since we are so to get climate action, climate change out there, let's try as much as possible to involve everyone on board. And the final example is the World Riot. You could realize this platform has been so amazing. The past 2 days, my colleagues have been doing wonderful. Speaking on climate change. This is a means telling people out there that this is what we need to do, bringing people on board, and the problem can be solved. But if we don't do that and we leave people out, honestly, it will be very difficult for us to achieve our goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you. We should always remember to include everyone in all of our activities and everything. And education is very, very powerful. So I will introduce our next speaker. His name is Wisdom Siake. Wisdom is a dedicated environmental educator, advocate, and inclusivity champion with a bachelor's degree in biology education from the University of Education, Winneba, Ghana. Having completed Beje Senior High School, Wisdom's passion for environmental science and commitment to equity led to a profound focus on integrating disability-friendly approaches into environmental education and addressing barriers affecting climate change awareness. Through Wisdom's work, there's a strong emphasis on the importance of diverse representation, cultural relevancy, and accessibility in fostering inclusive and impactful learning experiences for all. With a solid foundation in biology education and a profound understanding of inclusiveness, Wisdom endeavors to inspire the next generation of environmentally conscious leaders who embrace diversity and strive for a more sustainable and equitable future. Thank you, Wisdom.
Okay, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. Okay, for me, growing up as a child in the village, because called the Etui, before moving to Tema, which is a bigger city. So in the village, you see bush burning quite on a daily basis. And then the notion they have there is that uh, when the smoke goes into the atmosphere, that's what causes the clouds to, and the rain formation. So that's what that was the idea we had back then in the village. But then when I moved to the city, that's Tema and Ashaman, I saw those industries with film chambers. And I was like, wow, yeah, then rain here, there'll be too much rain here. Meanwhile, it's not supposed to be. It wasn't so. That's not the right. Uh, so that's what actually prompted me to further or to actually do to undertake a science course, which is the biology education at the university. Because I actually wanted to know how nature works. Then with that, I even got to know that those smokes fumes contain greenhouse gases such as the methane, fluorocarbon, and then carbon monoxide. So when those greenhouse gases goes into the atmosphere, they disrupt the formation of the formation of the ozone layer, which is found in the stratosphere. Okay, and then we know that those the ozone layer actually protects us from global warming or protects the air from the direct sunlight of the earth. But now, let's say, for instance, the carbon monoxide, it contains carbon and then one oxygen. When it goes into the atmosphere and reacts with the ozone contains 3 oxygen. It breaks the ozone down. So as the ozone layer breaks down that way, we receive direct impact of the sunlight. And then that increases the temperature of the earth, leading to melting of the glaciers and the rise in sea levels and the rest. So that's what actually prompted me to undertake this or to be an climate change advocate. Yes. So that's what that's my personal. Okay. And then I'll come to the inclusion of the education or inclusive education on climate. See, back then people weren't that much educated about this global warming. I mean, because I remember once in ecology class, ecology lecture, our lecturer asked if there's someone who thinks there's nothing like climate change. And then I was surprised to see some of our students saying, yeah, we don't have climate change, there's nothing like climate change. Because the way the earth is now, that's how it was back then. But then, with further deliberations and discussions, they got to understand that, oh, actually, the earth temperature is increasing at a faster rate, which, if immediate actions are not taken, it will send us to jeopardy. So that's a little contribution on my side. And then for the barriers or the challenges we face, my predecessors have already spoken much about those barriers. But then I would like to touch on the solutions. Okay, so for the solution aspect, we can have the first point as maybe including children. That's the both the andragogy and the pedagogy, including children and then both, and then the adults as well. Yes. So when we teach them this way, they become inclined. Then they know there's something actually happening. Then they also move forward to inform their peers. Yes. Then going on field trips, taking people on field trips, as in maybe you've gone to the community to engage them, to talk to them about climate change and the rest. You actually need to take them to fields for them to see the impact of deforestation, afforestation, the desertification and the rest, for them to feel the impact of their actions. Yes. And then there are some people that also believe that climate is actually caused by natural means. Then they don't believe activities also affect climate. But even the increasing of the earth temperature is actually caused mostly by human activities. Those natural activities don't even have that much effect on yes. And then there's also community involvement, which my Mr. Speaker Benjamin talked about. Yes. And you also have the parental engagement. Okay, so for the old folks, I think they are not much that educated about this stuff. So including them into the education sector or the climate education will actually benefit us a lot. Yes, and then with this, I think the earth will become resilient and then adaptable for us, the human as well. Okay. So that's my take on the climate action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wisdom. So I have a couple of questions for us. Can you share examples of effective strategies for making climate education more accessible to children from diverse backgrounds?
Please, can we get the question again?
The question is, can you share examples of effective strategies for making climate education more accessible to children from diverse backgrounds? Tapira, do you want to?
Yeah. So for me, I feel like the best strategy is to making sure that we co-create knowledge and materials that are closer to home, so that we speak about an issue in a way that is context-based, so that people can have a clear understanding and can easily relate to what's going on. For instance, you'll be speaking to a person who is from a rural background and teaching them about climate change you'd want to intentionally speak about how the rainfall patterns are affecting their production, are affecting maybe their daily livelihoods. That way, you would easily impact a person in their own context rather than coming in and just to speak about clean energy, solar panel energy, and other things that are more or less confusing to that demographic. So we really need to be intentional in creating the knowledge. That's one of the best strategies, that we need to first have content that fits in within totally different demographics, and also make sure that we cover for the most marginalized group, that is people with disabilities. So basically for me, that's the starting point strategy.
Thank you. I went to a program the latter part of last year, and we was discussing climate change. So I'm coming to, you mentioned being intentional. And one of the organizations, whenever they, how they actually, when they go to the communities, especially in the rural areas, one thing that they were saying is that, we already have education. We've been using understanding climate change for a long, 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 long time. It didn't just start now, but some of the ways that we can help teach them are the more practical ways, the ones that our forefathers have been using, which was the rainfall. So you just brought something back to my mind. Like I was like, reflection. Wow. Yeah. So rainfall is something that is very practical in the rural areas. And thank you for that submission. Benjamin or Wisdom?
Okay, so I believe we should have an inclusive education system where we should include our curriculum. We should include climate into the curriculum. That way, from the early stages of the kids' life, they are being told about climate. They are being educated about climate. Because if we start with them at a very tender age, once they are growing up, they have the idea, okay, when I do this, it's no good. When I do that, it's no good. And I think when we do that, it will really help. And secondly, I think we should use something like a form of storytelling. We should create a story where we tell the kids, look, these are the consequences of climate action. This is what will happen in the future. You have a planet to stay inside when you do this. You have a planet to stay inside when you do that. Because we know kids love stories so much. When you tell them story, they'll be ready to listen to you. And once we create a nice story using these consequences of climate actions, we really go a long way to have an impact in our words. Because first of all, at the tender age, we are educating them because it's in their curriculum. Then secondly, we've made available books in the form of stories to educate them about the consequences of climate action. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And when you was talking about the storytelling, I immediately thought about Abigail. On Wednesday, Abigail said that one thing that they did as part of their way of involving some of the youth or the children was for COP27, they created a comic book. So yes, I believe that storytelling or, having the visuals available for children, even when we think about this, because we're talking about inclusivity. So for our students that are blind, it should be made available for them in Braille. For our students that are deaf, we could also do it with sign language. So when we're thinking of these things, let's make sure that we're doing it in ways that will benefit everyone. Thank you for that, Benjamin.
Hello. I would also like to touch on the provisions of multilingual resources, such as the interpretations and translations. Okay. We talked about community involvement, hands-on learning, customizing curriculum, and the rest. But when translations and interpretations are not available, there might be barriers or there might be challenges for other people to understand what we're really trying to put across. So assuming this session we're having right now, maybe someone from Russia or China trying to follow us, and then there are no interpretations and translations, it will be difficult for that person to understand us. So providing climate education materials in multiple languages ensure that language barriers do not hinder access to crucial information. And then this makes it more inclusive and for non-native speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Wisdom.
You're welcome.
So I have another question for us as we're waiting for Joshua to come back. I would like us to, and anybody in our audience too, if you have an example of any effective strategies for making climate education more accessible to children from diverse backgrounds, please share it with us in the chat box so that we can hear your stories and so that we can also share. Part of our goals is SDG 17 that helps us partner to also make an impact. Maybe something that worked for you could also be a strategy for someone somewhere else.
I'll be using the slides here too. Yeah.
Joshua?
Can you?
Hello, can you hear me? All right. So
Yes.
I think I want to apologize first of all for wasting a lot of time. I mean, this is exactly what we are talking about, right? Internet in the 21st century world enables accessibility to education. So if internet service is very poor, then obviously accessibility becomes a challenge. So this is one of the things we are basically talking about on inclusive access to education or climate education for that matter. But I mean, quickly, let's zoom into the global statistics. And if you get a presentation, you can check. There is this document that was released. 2023 happened to be the midterm of the Agenda 2030, right? So we have basically about seven or so 6 years to go to 2030. And so one of the things that we realized was in the report, 94% of all the countries in the world have reported that they have integrated climate education into their curriculum. But I think Piwa, if I get your name right, you mentioned just only 53% actually have climate change written in their curricula. 47% do not have it at all. So as to what they are reporting, I don't know. If you break the statistics down further, it's only one, right? It's only one out of 3 teachers, right, that can effectively explain climate change to young people in their region. And that also translates. So in effect, when young people were asked how they understood climate change, 1 in every 5 young people said they needed more information. They don't understand what it meant. They had a lot of jargons and they were confused, right? And so that's the global perspective. But we have some sort of pillars, and most of you have touched on those pillars. The first one, integrating it into the curriculum. And I'm proud to say of the 53% countries that have done that, Ghana is one of those, right? And this happened in 2022 when the World Education Watch ran a project in the country, and 80% the project was successful because young people had knowledge with regards to the environment. So the government took it up and then integrated it into the curriculum. So right now, and as you know, if you are listening to international media, you know that Ghana has gone through a wave of curriculum changes, right from 2020. In fact, from 2019, when the talk started leading into COVID-19, and then after COVID-19, it's been implemented in the basic school. So right now, our basic school curriculum have that in place, and that is good. The only problem right now is execution. Teachers don't know how to even teach these things. Teachers are confused because of political expediency. Politicians are also playing with it. So yes, we've done X, we've done Y, but there are no textbooks for teachers to even rely on, right? Or for students to even rely on. So the textbooks are minimal. Teachers are being to use the internet to do research. But if you've not trained the teachers effectively on how to do research on the internet, how do they effectively even create their own teaching and materials to teach the kids? So execution has been the problem in Ghana right now, not policy, execution. So that is what is happening. Now, one of the things I remember last year, yes, thank you, Patrice, for that. I remembered last year we had a meeting. We had a meeting with the national curriculum, right? The organization in Ghana responsible for creating the curriculum, and they are done with the basic school. So they were doing that of the senior high schools, right? And we had a meeting with them, and obviously they stated a number of things. The good thing is that they are saying that this time around, when they are pushing the final curriculum for the senior high schools, they are going to make a checklist. So they are going to tell government that if you're not providing, because when they did the pilot, it came with certain resources. The schools that were selected had enough electricity. They had very good internet service. They provided the teachers with digital tools. So the students were also provided with some tablets so that they could, work with in class. So these are the checklists they are going to provide with government, that before you roll out the new curriculum for the senior high schools, all of these things need to be in place in schools. Otherwise, it is going to fail. And I think for once that is done and is publicly published, then we can also hold government accountable. And obviously, it reduces the incidence of the political gimmickry that we see in politics, especially since this year is also an election year in Ghana. So yeah, next slide. On pillars of education, the next one is active learning. And one of the things that the new curriculum for the senior high especially allows for is for teachers to look within the environment and look at places for active learning. So you might have heard from your research that Ghana houses one of the most toxic places on earth, which is known as Agbogbloshie, right? It's a place where scraps, electric waste is an electric waste dump. And that area has been categorized as one of the most toxic places on earth, akin to, where the nuclear bombs fell in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But if you look further, you'd see a cradle of innovation that is sparking there, because all over Ghana, if you look at our restaurants, our bakeries, and you see someone using a locally manufactured stove, a locally manufactured fridge, and all of these things are coming from innovative metal fabricators living there. And the funny thing is, the welding machines that they use, they built it from scratch using the electronic dump or electronic waste that is down there, right? They can take computers apart, right? And then reassemble it into new working computers. So beneath all the negative image, you have a cradle of innovation developing. And I think this can be taken up by the education sector, where young people go and then see how these people use traditional methodology to do these things, and then see how they can now bring insights from academic, merge it with these skills, and then be able to clean up and sanitize the area so that the place no longer becomes the most toxic place on earth, but a cradle of innovation, so to speak. Next slide, please. And in terms of accessibility and equity, I mean, you've talked a lot about this. In Ghana, most of these things were started, between the especially from 2010, between 2010 and 2016, these things were started, but most of them were discontinued because of lack of human resource. So either we don't have enough special educators to come be in the class, or government is unable to pay them. That is one. Two, lack of teaching learning materials, right? So teachers are taught these new skills, they're able to implement it for a month or two, and just after a while they return to old habits. It's very difficult to teach these people once in class with their colleagues. So why don't we put them in a separate class so that their special educators will handle them? Then we deal with the normal students in code. So these are some of the challenges that are happening, especially in Ghana. And I'm linking most of the things to Ghana because I'm Ghanaian. If there's any solution out there, I want people to know about the case studies in Ghana and then provide solutions so that we can use. So yeah, next slide. Cultural context. This is so very important. I'm sorry the picture is not clear, but I wanted to use this very picture because it shows intergenerational learning, right? Intergenerational learning. So there is a reason why our forefathers used to do certain things. And I do not believe green economy or the circular economy is a concept from the West. We used to practice as far as just 20 or 30 years ago, because when I was a kid, whenever we peel yam or cassava, my mommy would then dry it and then tell me to send it to my auntie who's rearing goods, right? So then we were also having some backyard farm, and then we take the droppings of these goods and then fertilize our backyard farm. So that was essentially a circular economy that we were creating, albeit very small. So what we need to do is be able to take the learnings from our old people and then see how we can scale them up. And also with climate education, this is what we know. This is what we were born from. So if you want to explain a very complex concept like the green economy or the circular economy, why don't you use these traditional practices that we're having already to explain it to the kids, right? It is very easy to understand that way. And because of that, they easily are able to draw lines on whatever they do every day at home, and then what they are studying in school. They can compare and then contrast, make learning, see what is right in both contexts, and then what needs to be modified in both contexts. So this is one of the things we need to do. Intergenerational learning, taking into cognizance the cultural context or the socio-cultural context in which this learning is taking place, and how can we achieve, or what can climate education help us achieve? It can help our young people become critical thinkers and problem solvers, right? Leadership and communication skills, entrepreneurial and technical skills. But for this to happen, we need to be deliberate in execution. And in Ghana, I would say we practice a 4 years system of electing a government, right? So every government that comes into power has a 5-year medium-term development plan, right? And then what we in the private sector need to do is to take, right, the targets and indicators from this medium-term development framework and begin to advocate. So the first year, you look at the targets and indicators, and then you look at the annual budgetary allocations, and then you begin to advocate. This is what you said you were going to do. Why have you not allocated enough funds to be able to meet the targets, right? And then if the funds are released, work with the local authorities to make sure that execution is done right, the targets are met. This is the only way we can help our government to meet Agenda 2030 and make sure that no one is left behind. Thank you so much.
That was a very nice presentation, very nicely said and delivered. It is our time. We have used all of our time this afternoon. So as we have come to a close of today's session, I want to extend my gratitude to everyone that has participated, everybody that has contributed in any type of way. And I would also like to give a big shout out and thank you to Takwa Chumbazui for your perspective, Benjamin Valentine Larke for yours, to Wisdom Siate, and then to Joshua Ayi on your views, your inputs in today's discussion. We've gained a large understanding of what it takes to make climate change a little bit more accessible and climate education so that it's inclusive for all. And for us here at Eclectic Love, it is very, very, very dear to our hearts to create learning environments where every child, regardless of their background or abilities, feels valued and empowered. And today we discussed that. Today it was something that we was able to come up with some solutions to. So as Tapiola said, the solutions are greater than the barriers. And so whenever there's challenges that are coming before us, especially in education, let's take those challenges and turn every single one of them into an opportunity. Once again, I'm Ms. Patrice Robertson, and thank you for joining us and bridging the gaps for inclusive education. Thank you.